Welcome everybody to our first panel on racism, diversity, and the student athlete. My name is Jimmy Walker. I'm the athletic director at Ventura College. Would first like to introduce our moderator, Ron Jenkins, currently a mentor and player development coach for Ventura College Football. Ron has over 20 years of experience as a State Department of Corrections officer and mentor after his playing days at Fresno State and East LA College. Welcome, Ron.
Cool. How you guys doing?
Good.
Joey Ramirez, alum in 1994, is our current head men's basketball coach, and he's been the WSC Coach of the Year multiple times. Welcome, Joey.
Thank you.
James Ennis, a 2011 men's basketball alum and current player for the Orlando Magic.
Hey.
Daisy Cardona, 2013 women's soccer alum, the 2012 JC Player of the Year, and former Oklahoma Sooner. Welcome. Justin Friedman, 2017 baseball alum and former Chicago White Sox minor leaguer.
How's it going?
Kara Joyner, 2017 women's volleyball alum. She transferred to Bethany College and then to a Black University. Welcome. And last but not least, Paris Dosh, a 2017 women's volleyball alum and former Cal Lutheran volleyball player and graduate. Welcome.
Hey guys.
Being our moderator, you can lead us in this discussion.
Okay. Welcome everybody to the discussion on racism, diversity, and being a student athlete. As a former student athlete, I personally experienced situations with racism. Just to give an example of that, and I'm going to go from 1 to 100. When I first arrived in Fresno as a student athlete, they actually had KKK rallies at one of the malls. It was a fashion fair mall. And here I am from South Central Los Angeles, knowing about racism, but not really growing up in an environment that perpetuated or the environment that supported it. Most of my early childhood experiences with racism were things that I heard in my community. I grew up in South Central Los Angeles. So I wasn't really emotionally affected by any racism or anything like that, but that situation in landing at Fresno State opened my eyes real fast. I'll never forget that experience. But at the same time, it wasn't groomed in me, so I didn't have an emotional connection to it. So I basically just ignored it and tried to focus on why I was in Fresno as a student athlete. And that's what I did my whole time there. So the question I'd like to pose right now is, who's experienced, racism? And you can tell a little bit about your experience, and then we'll go from there.
I think I have a very similar story to yours. Not growing up in an environment, I'm born and raised in Oxnard. It's a pretty mixed environment. We have Hispanic, we have Black, we have white. Especially down where I live, more towards Port Hueneme, we're more of a melting pot. So growing up, I didn't really experience racism at the forefront of my life. I'm a girl. I'm on the lighter spectrum of color, so people see me as less of a threat. But getting older, getting to college, and getting to people in I don't know if everybody's in their mind, they think it's racist, but you hold these biases inside of you where you see another person of a different race or someone different than you, and you hold this bias inside you that tells you something about them before you know anything about them. And
based on stereotypes.
Based on stereotypes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And right. I absolutely have fallen victim to just being part of someone's bias and having experienced the lesser end of that, and it sucked. I had to fight my way to be understood when I was judged based on something that didn't necessarily speak to my character. And I think that it is every athlete's job to speak up when they feel that way, whether it's your teammate, whether it's your coach, whether it's your classmate, anybody around you. It doesn't have to be a public discussion. It doesn't have to be something you discuss with someone else prior to discussing it with that person. It doesn't have to be a confrontation, but it needs to be a discussion. And for it to be an open discussion, both sides have to have open ears and open hearts. And I think that's where we have to start with.
Right. I want to comment. You said that you grew up in Oxnard.
Mm-hmm.
Oxnard, Ventura, Camarillo. You got all those little cities, you know, right there together. I actually lived in Oxnard as well, and I felt the same as you. You know, it's a combination of people. You know, so with that said, I visited Florida last year on a trip, and the part of Florida that I was in, I experienced some of the nicest Caucasian people that I could ever imagine. But here I am from California, and I watch the news, and it makes Florida seem like it's the most racist state, you know, in America or whatever, you know. And I was shocked by the way I was treated, and it just makes me understand how we are so misinformed depending on our geographical location. And then the other thing about that is it could have just been where I was, you know. So with that said, the young man that's in Florida right now, help me out.
Say it again?
What you didn't hear any of that?
I heard everything. You said something in Florida.
Oh, I said, what is your opinion on the things that we were just discussing about racism, diversity, and how do you feel about being in Florida? Because in California, you know, the news says to us that Florida is very racist, but I've had different experiences, so I want to know your opinion.
Yeah, I grew up in Ventura. You know, it's a mix, diversity. But I know different places as far as in like high schools and stuff. I went to Ventura High School, and I definitely felt, I don't know if it was racism or favoritism, but I definitely felt a little of that, just being a part of that school and stuff like that. And you know, I feel like it's wrong, you know, to judge people by the cover and stuff like that. Because once you get to know somebody, then that's when you really like know the person, what they've been through, stuff like that. You can't always judge people, and I feel like a lot of people judge people nowadays. You know what I'm talking about? So
Right, but we do it all the time.
yeah,
You know, we do it all the time based on things we hear. It could be based on the area that we live in. It could be based on, you know, the people that we're around, the people that we invite in our circles. I'm going to just give you a quick experience that I had, and this is a personal experience, and I'm going to be very vulnerable with it. So when I was at Fresno State, I was taking an upper division psychology class, and they had athletic tutoring services. So I put in for a tutor, and I showed up at study hall for this tutor session, and the lady who was going to tutor me was a Caucasian lady. And so she comes in the room, and we sit down, and she says, okay, what is it that you need help with? And I said, well, I'm taking this upper division psychology class, and I can't grasp it. It's a lot of information for me. She says, okay. So we sit down, and she says to me, okay, so why don't you read the first paragraph, and then we'll go from there. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, so obviously she thinks I'm Black, she thinks I'm an athlete, and she thinks I can't read, right? So, And these are all the things that society has taught me, that athletes are dumb, that, blacks can't read. This is back in 1986. So from that experience, I always had it in the back of my mind, like, what was her intentions to have me read? I read the chapter away, I blew the chapter away. And it wasn't until a few years ago, because from that day that I met her, we've been friends over 35 years. And as a matter of fact, she's retiring this Saturday. And I asked her, finally, after all these years, I asked her, I said, when we were in study hall and you asked me to read, I felt like you were asking me to read because I was an athlete or because I was black, and you wanted to confirm whether or not I could read. And she said, no, I was a education major, and that's what we do in education. They ask you to read so they can know where you are in order to move you forward. And that's a thing that I had in my head from society, or what people had told me, or even what I've heard in the media. Anybody want to comment on that? Any experiences like that? Anybody want to comment?
So, as I said earlier, my name is Justin. Baseball is a very different sport in the sense that the black community is very underrepresented. And so I think what you see oftentimes is everything's a lot more overt because people feel like they're in that echo chamber of white people where they can say a lot of things. And my experience has been interesting because my mom's half black. Obviously, you would never know looking at me. And so I think people say things around me that they wouldn't normally, and to me that they wouldn't normally. And so I've had a lot of experiences within the sport of coaches saying that they don't want to recruit black people because of a quote unquote attitude problem. There's difference in conversations of when they show emotion on like celebrating a home run or whatever it is. It's categorized differently. Getting scouted and recruited, they used a lot of phrases like raw athleticism and certain language like that. I've been told by teammates that I was okay because I was part N-word. So I think that the difference of experiences that people get now is, of course, the media shows the extreme, and on balance, I think people are relatively good. But there's a lot of things that I think have been relegated to the shadows because it's no longer acceptable to say, but that doesn't mean that they're not around. And so I've gotten to witness and experience a lot of that stuff. And then obviously I grew up in, predominantly white environments, but my entire family on my mom's side is black. I have like 50 relatives on that side. And so hearing their stories of, working in healthcare and trying to help somebody while they're spitting at them and saying, I don't want to be treated by a black person. And then me being in a baseball environment that's all white and people feeling very comfortable to say things that they would honestly never say if somebody was around that would be offended.
Right.
But they feel safe to do it in that environment. And so I think that's some of the stuff that honestly is just coming from, education, where if you're on a team, like a baseball team, and there's one black kid on the team, oftentimes he may not want to always have to call people out all the time because he's the only person, and it's easier for his experience to maybe not do that. And so I think a lot of times people think that they've said or done things that are okay that maybe aren't, because nobody's actually asked that kid what his experience is. Nobody's actually asked, how he actually feels. And they might even think he's their friend when really it's just easier to navigate that environment by just kind of being cool with everybody.
Right.
So baseball, I think, is very different than a lot of other sports because it is incredibly white relative to other sports. And then even at the major league level and everything as well. So that's just kind of my 2 cents. I think our sport is very different in how we operate. And it's also been very telling to kind of see how different it is, because in other sports, you guys are competing together. And so that can break down a lot of barriers. But I think baseball still has a long way to go, to be honest.
Right. Thank you. You have a very interesting side to the conversation, with you being both white and black, and look, like you said, you don't look any part of black. But I just want to ask this question. You said that it's easier for a black player in this environment, in this baseball environment that's predominantly white. It's easy for a black player to sort of just hush and keep to himself. But like, what is the emotional impact on him? You know, how is that affecting him as a person in terms of being on a baseball team? Say a guy that's gotten a scholarship, he's worked all his life to get this scholarship, and now he's placed in this environment in which he can't totally be himself. He has to restrain some of his joy for something that he worked so hard. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think first of all, none of us should speak for any individual's trauma, like whatever they experience and how they go through it and what it is. But what we can do is actually ask and have those conversations and check in with players, you know, from a coaching side and be like, how's your experience going so far? Right. You know, because you know, if you're at a school and there's only one black kid on your team, you know that he goes through things. And so being able to check in and have those conversations and work on what we can do, and also be able to honestly look at yourself and say, okay, am I biased in how I'm recruiting kids? Are there kids that maybe could also be a part of this program that would make the experience better for everybody? And so I think that our culture is one that is really strong on silence. We're not, even if you just look at social media and celebrity appearances, like our sport is not really one that speaks out. This is maybe the first time that it's starting to do that. Right. So that is, you know, that next step of hearing things change. Like Torrey Hunter is a professional baseball player. He had the cops called on him for going into his own home because he moved into a very, you know, wealthy area and they didn't think a black person could live there. And the cop pulled a gun on him because he thought he was breaking in, and then made him go get his ID. And then when they found out who he was, they asked for season tickets, and he was told not to talk about it. And he, you know, and so like, first of all, listening to the stories because they're out there and they exist. And then taking those steps to be like, okay, we want to know what our program is doing wrong and be open to that criticism, because I guarantee there's something. Without even realizing it, I guarantee there's a way that certain language that you use, certain ways that you differentiate when you're discussing talent, when you're recruiting, certain areas you go and don't go. Like taking an honest look at where your program's at and being like, okay, what kind of experience are we providing to everybody, and how are we, you know, integrating certain things? And I just think that sport in particular, like I said, just really needs to take that step. And, you know, it's when you're isolated like that, regardless, you're in isolation because you're one, maybe two guys on a team. Right. You don't see that with basketball. You don't see that with football. And it's just a very different experience. And we really need to work to change that, but then also take care of the people that we do have in our program.
Right. So you're saying that there are biases in recruiting. Is there any Absolutely. Other coach on the panel that want to discuss that?
Well, real quick before we discuss that, I just want to introduce Cedric Zabalos, 1988 VC alum, also the VP of the Dallas Mavericks, joining us for the panel. You know, Joey, I know Paris wants to say something, because watching, you know, Paris played volleyball, which is a predominantly white sport. Kira, you played volleyball, and you talked about your team and them not knowing your experiences sometimes. And then we can tie into Joey with the coaching part, going in on how recruiting. So Paris, you know, talk about your experience. And, you know, Daisy, you need to jump in because you went to Oklahoma, you know, coming from Oxnard, Ventura area, and you go to Oklahoma, that's completely different than what you're used to here. So, you know,
For
Paris.
Sure.
Right.
So Paris, how was your experience?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I grew up in Ventura. I'm a Caucasian female, so I haven't experienced, you know, anything that is being said by others, and I'm thankful for that. And I do feel like, you know, kind of just along the lines with what Justin said, it's not my place to judge anyone for what they've been through or their trauma or anything like that. I have so much respect and love in my heart for all the girls that I've played with, Kiki, Armani, all my girls that I've played with that, you know, are of color. And I always want to be sensitive to that, and I always want to make sure that I'm speaking up for them, because as Kiki knows, we're still friends to this day, and I love her, played with her for 2 years, and I think it's super important for those of us that are predominantly in a sport where, you know, it is Caucasian, volleyball, for example, like you said, predominantly Caucasian, to speak up and to just kind of say, hey, like, this doesn't need to be the way it is, and we need to make sure that, you know, we're being inclusive and supportive and really feeling like a team. And two, I totally agree with, you know, what Justin was saying about checking in with those people and, you know, letting them know, hey, like, I can't fully understand, but I would love to understand, and I'm here for you to support you, and I'm stoked to be playing with you, and, you know, all of those things. Something else that I wanted to add, though, onto what Ronald was saying about his tutor, which I thought was really interesting. I'm in education now, so I'm going back to school to get my teaching credential and my master's. And I do have to say that a lot of this type of stuff starts at a young age.
Right.
I've experienced it. You know, with the kids that I work with, and I predominantly work with kids that are in 1st and 2nd grade. I had several interactions and teachings with a little boy who was African American, who was in 1st grade, that expressed to me he felt different because of his skin color. And, you know, as his student teacher and as his mentor, I tutored him for a full year. And, you know, I really found that I was having to kind of help him adjust his thinking a little bit, just from his own experiences, you know, being younger, which I thought was really sad and really upsetting to me, because that's really hard to hear, you know, from someone so young. And I think it really does start, you know, at a young age, and all of us that don't experience it directly need to know that. We don't know their experiences. We don't know what they've been through. We don't know how they've felt or situations that they've been in that, you know, have just really hurt them and made them feel like they've been wronged. And that's really important to acknowledge and address.
Wow, that was good. I appreciate you being so honest. But I want to ask you, so what are some of the things that you felt you needed to do to make this young man feel more comfortable in that environment? And I appreciate you recognizing that and even being able to have a conversation with him like that. So what are some of the things that they've taught you as an educator and how to handle those situations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm doing my teaching credential through California Lutheran University. They have incredible programs put in place for all types of things, from cultural proficiency to diversity to making everybody feel, you know, celebrated, accepted, wanted, all of that. So just based off of my teaching and what I've been taught by, you know, people up in the district and everything, I've just really tried to, you know, I've experienced this multiple times, but with this certain individual, I just encouraged him, and I just told him, hey, you know, it doesn't matter. That does not matter at all. You are capable. You are able. You're doing these things so well. You know, I think it's really important to give lots of positive feedback and just make them feel like they can. And then also, you know, I talked to his classmates as well, because he said that, you know, he was specifically upset about a couple Caucasian boys in his class that he felt like wouldn't play with him. And I went to those boys specifically and had a conversation with them. You know, obviously they're in 1st grade, so the vocabulary and what is said is obviously, you know, sensitive. I'm trying to explain to them in a way they can understand. But it's also sad from their perspective, because they could potentially be being taught that in their environment, you know? So based off of, you know, who they're around, their parents or whoever. But it definitely is a vicious cycle, and it needs to be addressed. And I think it needs to be addressed at the source. I know it is hard. It is harder. Obviously, I'm dealing with, you know, younger kids. But I think it is really important to, you know, go to those people and just say, hey, you know, this isn't how it's supposed to be, and this is what we need to do. And this is, you know, we need to make sure we're being sensitive and accepting and encouraging. And, just so they know for a fact that that's not okay, at least when they're at school or when they're in a sport or whatever.
Right. I agree with you that as educators, as coaches, as people who work in environments where we're trying to uplift our young kids, no matter what age, we do have to be supportive. And the problem comes when we just let it go and we don't do anything. So I appreciate you for being the person that stepped up and, made a difference in this situation by speaking up. So Cedric, how you doing? Welcome to the panel, man.
Thank you very much. My apologies. I'm thinking 6:30 my time. I'm in the country, so.
It's all good. First of all, man, hey, thank you for the moments of glory, that you had as a player. Appreciate you joining us today. So we're discussing racism, diversity, and the student athlete. Hey, man, anything you want to add?
Yeah, let me start with my own little story. I grew up in LA. And also I spent every summer here where I am now in East Texas in the country life. So I got the best of both worlds, so to speak, the city life and also the country life. I've experienced all kind of races. Matter of fact, growing up, and I'm not dropping dimes or anything, but, my best friends, and they're still my best friends, Spanish guy and a white guy. I mean, this was us three, and we was known in the neighborhood, and that's just the way it is. But at the same time, my first experience on having other than a black teammate or a black coach started when I went to Ventura College. That was Ned Mercedes was my first, not black coach. Steve Benalis, Garrett Warden, Heckman, all of them. I can go on and on and on, naming all of them. That was my first experience not having a black teammate. Because of where I grew up. And also, I think the whole county kind of embraced us. And I think it all boils down to, Coach Phil Matthews and the attitude that he took towards everybody. If you guys have never met Phil or never seen him coach, it's no discrimination in his language. I mean, if you did something that was wrong, he let you know, whether you were black, white, red, doesn't matter. He lets you know about it. And I think that's what helped us all come together in my first year there and winning that championship because of that. And then the staff, there was racism on the teaching staff, but it wasn't bad racism. It was a racism of, this kid is coming from LA and Compton. Let me give him a chance at life. They extended themselves more. And I don't know if you really want to call that racism, but they saw somebody who, they came from the inner city. Yeah, and they said, let me use this as a crutch for them to help them out, which, obviously worked out great for myself and other teammates that came in and out of there. It's just, that's the wonderful thing about sports. It doesn't matter where you come from, or you're rich, poor, you're black, you're white. If you can play, you can play. And it brings guys together, especially on the team. I played on tons of teams with, guys have different attitudes about, certain things. And yes, played with guys who were racist and guys who weren't racist, or, even, and then don't get me wrong, there's racism on both sides, on all sides. It's not just, one way. But I think the leader, that's why I think coaching is so important. And I'm not just saying this because Joey's on the line and he probably needs to turn this off anyway, but the fact that he embraces everything that comes, and let's deal with it. How are we going to deal with it? And whose feelings will survive while he's dealing with it? And just watching him in practice, watching him in games, listening to the pregame speech, listening to the games after he wins, listening to the games after he loses, the way he conducts himself. And it's just a mirror of how he was raised and the diversity that's going on. And I think the reason that sports does that is because our objective is one thing, and that's to win. And if we don't win, we all cry, regardless of what race we come from or background we come from. Garrett Warden was one of my teammates, and he came from a very wealthy background, and and it wasn't because his parents just gave it to him. I mean, the kid held down 2 jobs while playing for Phil. Think about that. You got 2 jobs while playing for Phil, and your parents are already successful, he just had that work ethic in him, and it kind of rubbed off on other people who were like, man, I'm not going to let myself struggle because Garrett is handling 2 jobs and he drives from, I think he was in Camarillo or whatever, and he gets to class and he does this and all that. We all looked up to him as an example. So it really doesn't matter then. But I do love the fact that everybody in Ventura really embraced not only myself, but other inner city kids, Black kids that were coming in, and gave them that extra little push and to say, hey, all right, you know, a paper is due, or we got a test coming up, you know. And I don't know, you know, I really was a person who was advocate about when a lot of the bitter people were saying that we were cheating and we did all this other. I mean, it really hit me hard because I dug in. I really embraced all the help that I got, and I really honored my degree there, my time there, the friendships and the relationships that I gathered from there. I mean, we have a brotherhood, you know, just because you didn't play with me, you know, every time I see him, you know, Ennis come to the game, I was like, yo, let me speak. Let me, you know, make sure I get a hug and all that. And that's just the way we are, the way our fraternity is. And it doesn't matter who you are. But I think the most important thing is that we conducted ourselves knowing, I don't know if we really got harassed while we were there in Ventura at all by any police officers or something like that, or had a lot of racism coming down on us. But I think we all conducted ourselves at a higher level, not to try to get involved in that stuff. And don't get me wrong, the stuff that's happening to people, they're not egging this on. They're not asking for it. I'm not saying that that's what we were doing, but you know, just the way we loved each other and we looked after each other, and the way Coach ingrained in us to make sure we look after each other, we all did that. And in my class, my 2 years there, I don't recall any racism, any bad blood between white, Black, or any other race and while we were there.
Well, I think with an athletic background, all of us, you know, would agree that sports is the ultimate equalizer when it comes to racism. There's something about the way it's taught, the way it's coached, the camaraderie, being together every day, watching each and every one of us go through blood, sweat, and tears, all with, you know, one goal, and that's to win. When I was asked to be the moderator, I had to really think about it, taking into consideration everything that's going on right now, you know, with the Mr. Floyd case and other cases that are popping up. So, you know, when these cases come forward, and they have many times before, you know, we tend to think more about racism. We tend to think more about situations that we've been in. And I accepted this because in my time, first of all, thank you guys for welcoming me to the Ventura family, if you've welcomed me. So my experience with Coach Moose, Coach Morris, AD Jimmy has always been positive. And if it wasn't, I probably wouldn't have accepted this. But my experiences has been awesome. Sounds like, Cedric, your experiences has been awesome. Can we hear from some other the panel members that we quite haven't heard from? What is your take on sports and racism? Specifically, I wanted to get back to something we talked about earlier. Is there biases in recruiting? If one of the coaches want to speak on that.
I want to kind of piggyback off of what Ron, you started with and said came in with was, you know, I had a Ventura College, I've been there 11 years as a coach, and I looked at the stats, and the Black community has never been represented higher than 3%. And it's predominantly basketball and football. And I had an interesting conversation with Coach Moose the other day, and you know, Coach Moose has been around a long time.
Right.
And he made a comment, and he said, Joey, I've never recruited looking at color. If you can play, you can play. If you can't play, you can't play. And I took that to heart because, you know, when Ced talked about coach, and I came into VC in 1992 from Santa Paula High School, I was the only non-Black student athlete in the program of probably in excess of 20 plus players. 2 gyms full of, let me find, you know, 8, 9 guys that can play. And to this day, even as a coach, when he said that, for him to have to tell me that, I'm thinking, you know, what's going on in this world? Like, I thought that's what it was supposed to be. If you can play, you can play. If you can't play, you can't play. And all, you know, junior college, community college, however way you look at it, student athletes come to us for different reasons, you know, and I've never looked at it like you're black, you're red, you're white, you're purple, whatever it is. I've never looked at it like that. One of the best shooters to ever come through VC, and you know, I'm a big part of the VC family as a young kid, as a player, student athlete, now as a coach. Austin Ramyak, Oak Park High School, Caucasian. His best friend to this day, he met at VC, Eric Mitchell from Chicago. The type of atmosphere, and I've heard a lot of people, I've listened to a lot of the people talking in this panel, and they've talked about it, they've said the word environment. Environment is huge. Environment is humongous, no matter even if, you know, we have in our whole entire school 3% Black represented. When these kids come, in my experience as a coach, they don't want to leave. They love it out here because of the, you know, the mentorship, the community, the engagement. You know, they're not just coming here to play the sport. They're coming here for the full deal, the full package. They're part of the community, right? You know, and, you know, it's from day one. You know, I like to bring our recruits in right when camp starts. So they come into the camp and they're with the kids, and right away, there's an immediate connection into the community. And it's not just basketball. It's, you know, it's the community and it's the involvement. And, you know, so the recruiting part, you know, mentioned at the end of what he was talking about was about winning. Well, I think as a coach, I think we all want to win, you know, and if we don't win, we feel a certain type of way. But at Ventura, and I say this not to be arrogant or anything, but at Ventura, we're not in it to just win games. We're in it to win everything. We want the state GPA award. We want to matriculate all the sophomores. We want to do all those things, make them, you know, help them, you know, with great citizenship and everything else. And I think we do a good job of that, but it has a lot to do with the community and everything we have in place for them to be able to do what they do. But, you know I'm going on and on, but this is huge to me because when I came back from playing and I got a job at Santa Paula High School, back at my high school, I was brought into the principal's office 2 weeks into my tenure and was accused of being racist towards white people. And I've been teaching for 22 years. My first 2 weeks, I gave a referral for a white student that jumped out of the window to go to the bathroom instead of using the door. And I'm looking around like, you could have just used the front door. Right. Well, he jumped out to try to be funny. So I wrote him a referral. I'm a new teacher. I, you know, got my tie on, just, you know, you ain't gonna mess with me. Wrote him a referral. You can't jump out of the window. Right. I was pulled into the principal's office. Principal called me in, you know, before, told me what was going on and said, you know, and I'm not going to say the kid's name. I know this kid's name. And he said, you know, you're being accused of being racist towards white people. And I said, well, you know, Mr. Gaitan, I said, my mom's white. You know, they look at Ramirez and they think, you know, Mexican, whatever. It was right after the summer, so I had a little bit of Cancun tan on me. So I was, you know, I was a little darker. And so I go in there and when I went into that meeting with that family, I had a picture of my wedding party. One picture of my mother, second picture was with my wedding party. My wedding party was myself, my grandfather was my best man, and the rest were everybody I played with that were black. Those are my brothers. Right. And when I showed the parents first the picture of my mother, and then I showed them the picture of my wedding party, their mouths dropped. The meeting ended in 5 minutes after that.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Let me ask a question. It was brought up earlier. So here you are bringing the situation, you know, your family and how racism doesn't exist. So when you recognize that there's color, is that being racist? Anybody want to answer that question?
Yes. No, there's not. If you're saying there is no color, I think you're racist, because there is. You know, there's white, black, there's brown, there's yellow, there's everything. But you saying that no, I don't see color and this, that, no, that's wrong. You have to, because you have to see that human being for what they are, for what they were raised on, and the cultures that they live. You know, and like I said before, when I was coming into Ventura, we had a lot of teachers that gave up to myself, would make sure they get on my case a little bit more than they got on everybody else. And I was fine with that. That's a good, you know, like I said, that may have been a good racism. Them thinking like, okay, this kid doesn't have nothing, you know, a lot going on for him, but I'm gonna do my best to try to give him a fair shot at this crazy thing called the world. And that's what they were doing, you know, from the Papiels to the, I mean, it varies. It went from white teachers, Spanish teachers, black teachers, they all, and it might have been the fact that Phil had already said, hey, watch out for my boys. I'm you know, they coming from the gutter and to this beautiful county called Ventura. And, you know, my beaches at Venice and Santa Monica don't look like the beaches at Ventura. You know what I'm saying? My apartment buildings don't look like the apartment buildings in Ventura. The homes, I can go on and on and on and on about the differences, but it's just, you know, if you say that, no, I don't see color, then that puts you in a situation you got to really think about it, because as much as, you know, and I want to say this and have this on tape too, as much as I wanted to try to mess up, there was a little Spanish lady named Becky Hull that would knock you off your feet if you even thought about going the wrong way. And she addressed everybody the same way. And it's the reason why she walks around with a fistful of rings, is because she didn't care what sport, she didn't care what race, she didn't care if you had a mama, didn't have a daddy, it didn't matter. She was treating you the same way, and she'd get on you, and then after you leave, she'd say, I love you, hug you, and get you on about your way. So for a young kid, and I was 2 years under where I was supposed to be in college, I was supposed to still be a junior in high school, that was more than enough to keep me pushing, to keep me, you know, not breaking down, because a lot of players do. They get away from home, and it's not the same. And coach is too hard on me, and I'm not playing, and, you know, all these other things. School is too hard, and I got too much free time. There's so many things that you have to deal with as a student athlete that can break you down. But to have that backbone from all kind of races at Ventura College helped me out so much.
I just want to comment, since we are talking about coaches at Ventura College, and I happen to be recruited and signed and coached by Coach Mushade. And so that's my connection to this Ventura family here, or this Ventura tribe. Coach Moose had to come recruit me out of South Central Los Angeles. I was living on Colden in Vermont, which is a high gang, high drug, high crime, high intensity area. Just to give you an example, I have 4 brothers killed before I was 22. I had a sister go to prison for drug addiction. My mom died when I was a baby. I was actually growing up in foster care. And I didn't start playing football until I got into 10th grade, because a good friend of mine played. And then 4 years later, here comes Coach Moose. And this is a funny story, but it's not a funny story. Coach Moose drives up in my neighborhood in his Volvo. And I actually lived in a back house. So it's not like he could come to the front door and knock. He had to wait until somebody came out. So I hear somebody outside, and I look out there, and it's him. And he's holding his composure, but you could tell he was a little, nerve-wracked about it. But that situation turned out to be a good situation for a lot of reasons. I'm gonna just say this: he saved my life from a lot of things. So with that said, and talking about racism and all these things that we're discussing today, who on the panel does recruiting, or who on the panel has had situations where they've had to go into a place where, you know, they didn't feel comfortable about it, and how did you handle that situation?
I'd like to speak about that. So I grew up in Ventura, and being Hispanic, I grew up primarily playing club soccer with white girls. So going to Ventura College gave me an opportunity to meet two of my best friends that were Mexican, so I could relate to them. And fast forward, I graduate from VC, I have an opportunity to go to Oklahoma. So growing up in Ventura, it's been where I'm around Mexicans, I'm around Black people, I'm around white people, a variety of people, right? So going to Oklahoma, I mean, I only had watched the movie Twister. I don't know if you guys have watched it, the tornado movie. I didn't know much about Oklahoma. The coach kind of just reached out to me and offered me a scholarship, and I said, why not go visit, take a chance, right? Get out of my comfort zone. So I go to Oklahoma, but in my head, I'm thinking, like, why is he recruiting me? I'm 5'3". I'm not a tall, blonde, athletic soccer player, which growing up, I've learned that most coaches would want the ideal recruit, but I was not the ideal recruit, but I felt like there was something that I could give to that program. So I took a chance, and he took a chance on me. And I think just having that mindset already from, I guess, other people's understanding, or like having them like, oh, well, you're not tall, or you're not this, you're not that, but kind of believing in myself and seeing myself as important. And the recruiting process to D1, I mean, it can vary from your size, from your skills, from your education, from if you're like if you have good grades. So I kind of going to Oklahoma, not knowing anybody, not knowing other people that look like me in the state of Oklahoma. I kind of thought to myself, like, am I supposed to be here? Should I be here? Like, I had a lot of questions.
Right.
But at the back of my mind, I was like, why not take this chance and grow as a person? And like you mentioned, the word environment, immerse myself into that environment and see if I could grow. And when I was living out there, it was really tough for me because I got homesick, because growing up, I would always have Mexican food. I would go out there to Mexican restaurants, and there was no Mexican people at the Mexican restaurant. They were all primarily white. And I would walk in, and everybody would kind of just stare at me because I was that brown girl with my white teammates. And it's kind of like ironic, because it's like I'm Mexican in a Mexican restaurant and not feeling comfortable.
Right.
And I kind of thought to myself, well, like, why do I feel like this? Like, I can change that mindset. With the help of my teammates, I was showing them a little bit more about my culture. And I think that's what helped me as a person and as a player, that my teammates that were surrounding me daily opened up their minds and thought, why not like learn about the food, learn about this? So that helped out. And same thing with the coach. My second school in Oklahoma, Rogers State University, they let me throw like a fiesta theme, like I guess not initiation, but I wanted my teammates to know about enchiladas, to know about all the yummy food that they probably have never had in the state of Oklahoma.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Awesome. That's awesome.
Hey, Ron, I kind of
Yeah.
want to turn a little bit to this with James, and then Jesse Lemonnier just joined us. He was in meetings, 2017 football player at VC and with the Chargers. But with James, and I'm going to go to Jesse after that because they have two different experiences. James from Ventura, living on the Avenue. You know, I live on the Avenue. What was your experience growing up in Ventura? And then Jesse, you coming from the East Coast to Ventura, kind of talk about that and the diversity and anything. So James, you know, kind of lead with that.
Yeah, it was tough. I'm not gonna lie to you. I stayed on Ben Street, 3 streets over from one of the toughest streets, like on the avenue of Ramona Street. So, you know, it was hard for me and my brothers and my friends, you know, because we had to walk mostly when we were younger. So we had to walk to the gym and stuff like that. And we had, you know, Spanish like homies and stuff try to fight us every day and stuff like that. So we had to go against the odds every day, you know. But the gym kept us off the streets as far as in that. But you know, it's hard growing up when you have someone against you every day. And one thing that kept me really focused was, you know, basketball. And I know basketball was gonna be the escape to get my family off of the avenue and stuff like that. But you know, once you grow, like when you're young African American growing up in a low poverty, you know, you already have your mindset as far as like, you know, you're not gonna have nothing easy in life. You know, you're always gonna go against the odds. So it's just, you know, just gotta find something, you know, that I found basketball, that was my passion, that kept me, you know, off the streets and stuff like that. And, you know, at one point on the avenue, like we couldn't walk on the streets for like a whole month because every black person they seen, they were gonna beat up or jump just because it was another fight with another black person they had with like the gangsters, like the avenue gangsters and stuff like that.
That's called a green light in prison. I worked in the prison system of over 20 years, and when they placed a green light on a race, you're right. That's exactly what happened.
So all the black people had a green light on them. You know, it sucked because we're innocent. We're innocent. We play basketball, and that's all we knew. But we had to adjust to that. You know, we're walking in the back streets, walking on the bike paths, running home, any way to not be seen by homies. I love Hispanics. You know, like Joey, one of my best coaches I ever met in my life. He changed my life. You know, I came to BC because of Joey and Cowan. You know, and look where I'm at today. You know, by him believing in me, like as far as in a human being, not just as an athlete. You know, so. It's hard, you know, just growing up in the hood, but you know, everything works out as it should at the end of the day, so I keep going.
Right. So you do agree that it's a little tough on African Americans, but we just got to stay the course, and hopefully we end up around good people who embrace us, people who allow us to express our culture. But these things are important, and it's important for an environment like a school campus, you know, to have some of the things that we discussed here today. My next question is: we all agree that racism exists, right? We do agree with that. We have great stories. I mean, we do. And some of those stories would talk about the diversity of not only Ventura College, but some people talked about Oxnard. Some people talked about their experience in Ventura and having all the different races, you know, which made everybody feel uncomfortable. I'm gonna give an example of, I was in Camarillo one day on a Sunday afternoon, and I was driving. I was taking my time, I was listening to my jazz, and I actually got pulled over by Camarillo PD. And I asked the guy, why was he pulling me over? And he said, you were driving too slow. And I was like, driving too slow? I didn't even know that was an infraction. He goes, yeah, it creates suspicion. And I said, oh, really? So he ended up running my plates, and I could hear dispatch say he's a peace officer. So he came back to the car and he said to me, he said, sir, can I ask you why, when I stopped you, why did you have your hands out the window? I said, because I wanted you to feel safe. And I think as athletes, as African-American athletes, as Black athletes, as African-Americans, it's unfortunate that racism exists. It's unfortunate that systemic racism exists, which is the driving force in all of this. And I'm gonna just give my example of systemic racism. I don't wanna get all into slavery because we already know those stories. We've seen the police brutality stories. We've seen all of these things take place, but I'm gonna just say my idea of systemic racism has to do with economic power. And because of that, I don't feel that systemic racism is gonna go away. However, I do feel that on our level, that's like something that we can't touch. You know, we don't even, our pay grade is not that high. Well, maybe Cedric, but not ours. You know, so that's another area that I've always been taught as an athlete. You worry about the things that you can control. Would you guys agree with that? Anybody want to comment?
Well, I think Jesse can comment on that. You know, being that he's, you know, he came East Coast, West Coast, back to the East Coast, back here in the West Coast now at the Chargers. You know, how do you feel and see that, Jesse?
What was the question again about systematic racism, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there's a big thing. I think just, you know, in the beginning, just we're set up to, you know, fail almost. And I know the stories about, you know, things like Planned Parenthood, where it's like, you know, it is made for like to kill black babies from the beginning, and the welfare system, and you know that's basically to take out, you know, the father from the household and get paid, and it's like, you know, there's things in the system that's here just to break up, you know, the family system, and you know throughout it breaks down the kids because, you know, being a single parent, you know, it's tough. Like the kids seek, you know, fatherhood like elsewhere. So I feel like just the system just worked against us. And, you know, like you were saying about, you know, slavery, and, you know, there's no slavery anymore, but, you know, they progress and, you know, change things up, tune things up to kind of, you know, close us in and, you know, make us fail in a way, I would say.
Well, I mean, I agree with you. I agree with you. Racism does exist. And as a correctional officer, I've had many conversations with young black men about racism. And the one question that I always have, the last question I always have is this. If you know this, what are you doing to prevent this from happening to you? I mean, because at some point, we have to put responsibility on ourselves. Yes, racism exists. So what can you do as a person? What are your options as a person to overcome or do something different? Like Coach Moose always says, if you continue to do things the same way, you're going to get the same outcome. So
can I kind of counter that actually?
Go ahead.
So, and maybe this is, you know, my take on this has always been because I can see my family's experience versus my own. This is a problem that was very deliberately created. It was very deliberately created by people, white people in this country, whether it's redline housing, mass incarceration, all these systems that have been put in place, suspending people at a much higher rate, which then gets them out of the schools and into the, you know, juvenile correction facilities. Like there's so many things that have been put in place. And so while none of us, nobody who's white should ever tell a person who's black how they should solve a problem, I think white people have a lot more steps that they can be taking because they are in the position of power and also spending power, you know, whether it's loans for black businesses and things that aren't happening. Like, I think that anybody who has been on the receiving end of this can choose how they want to handle it. But I think we've reached a point where it's no longer enough for a white person to just be like, yeah, you know, these things are really bad and it's a shame that it's that way, but what can I do? I just personally feel like anybody who's on the other end of that and has directly benefited from centuries of that, that's not really gonna fly anymore. And I think that whether it's education or looking at spending power and actually consciously choosing to find black-owned businesses in your area and contribute to them, like I think that's something that needs to be more of a conversation for people who are white, of you guys need to actually do something. And even if it's just you as one person in small acts, like just making steps towards correction. You know, none of us has the trillions of dollars that would be needed for reparations. Like no individual here has that. But we can, you know, inject money into that economy, which has historically been deprived of it. And that's something that I think, you know, as a team, teams could do that stuff. Like I said, baseball's a very white sport. You know, as a team, choosing where you go and get your meals from and doing dinners. And I think there's a lot of cool ways to incorporate those things. So that's just my 2 cents on it.
Wow, that's
That's
I
huge.
love that.
Yeah.
I love that answer. So instead of going always to Olive Garden, let's go and try some soul food. Let's go try some Mexican food. Let's go try
Go to
some
Roscoe's.
Italian food.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
go to Roscoe's. That's right. That's right. Go to Roscoe's.
You know,
Let me just say this. Let me say this. I wasn't trying to dumb down the fact that slavery has existed and racism does still exist today. I wasn't trying to dumb that down. I'm a black man, okay? So I know the pain. So I can speak from that perspective. I'm gonna just give an example and then Sabalos, you could take it. So when I was in college, I wrote a paper. We had to develop a program that we wanted to take back to our community and facilitate, you know, to help out our community. So I wrote this paper and I felt like it was one of the best papers that I ever written. My teacher was a white guy and he was blind. And he called me up to the class after all the other students was gone. And he said, Mr. Jenkins, he said, this is a great paper. He goes, it is magnificent. He said, however, if you want to be a great social worker, you have to write a paper that's conducive to saving everybody. And that was a aha moment for me. It was one of the greatest life lessons that I had at that time as a 20-year-old college student, because all I thought about was, you know, my community. And through my courses in social work, I learned about cultural sensitivity, which is so important, you know, especially on a college campus, in schools. Like the young lady mentioned earlier, she experienced a situation with the young African-American kid. So that was a lesson for me in not really who I was, but where I was in terms of my mental process. And I want to pose this question right here now to Cedric. How many times has someone questioned you because of your last name?
If I had a dime, no.
Right.
It just,
Right.
yeah. Let me answer that question first. Yeah, and it's you know where you come from, you know, where'd you get that last name? You know, I even every time the Olympics come around, they try to put me on the Mexican national basketball team, which I do not object to. Like a chance to go to the Olympics, you know, Joey's gonna teach me some Spanish. I'm gonna go and be the MVP of the league. You know what I'm saying? Old as I am, but it is what it is. But you know, that'd be a great honor regardless, because I'm so highly into sports that would be a great honor regardless if it's not my country, my actual country that I play for. I just think this is a great answer. Obviously, somebody in my timeline has been some sort of Spanish or, you know, some way, somehow. So, you know, I have some Hawaiian side of it. That's where I get it from. So it has to go back to Spain eventually. But yeah, but tons and tons of time again that has happened. I just want to touch on, go back and touch on Justin. Great words, man. And I had Mark Cuban had a casual conversation outside the arena about a week back and asked me to speak. And I ended my speech with saying, you know, this is an opportunity for people with white privilege to use their white privilege against those who have white privileges. And that's just what Justin was saying. You know, you just can't sit back and be like, all right, that has nothing to do with me. But it does have to do with you, because it's going to deal with your teammate. It's going to deal with the teacher. It's going to deal with an officer that you create, that you encounter on the street. All of that by the pounding of us as Black human beings in this world, it's going to affect you, because it's not like you can go hide somewhere, you know, and only deal with your race. It's not going to happen. As much as these race warriors want to say that, like, we need to all have separation. It's not going to happen. That's not the key to this. Right. You know, the key to this is just having an understanding. You know, I'm from LA. You're from here. You're from here. And it's different ways. We cook our peas different. We make sure some people don't like their mashed potatoes to touch their, it's just the way it is. And you just have to understand that that's different. That doesn't make us good. That doesn't make us bad. If you're a bad individual, I don't think race has nothing to do with it. Now, don't get me wrong, because you are not given a fair shake, it gets a little bit more frustrating. So you try to go get out of this. More minorities try to get out of that unfairness by taking a chance at being a drug dealer or taking a chance at robbing, the easy way out. But then again, there's so many more that just take the right path that people like you have all done and I have done. And to hold that against us just because of a skin color, like right now, the gay lesbian community is really stepping up saying this is our opportunity. You've already shined. You've already gotten that respect. You've already gotten that respect. Like, doesn't matter on what gender I am or who I want to be with sexually. I still need to be treated just as fair as any other individual. And they're getting that. But at this point in time, it's an opportunity to open up. And they're opening up and going, hey, we've been there. And I go, no, I don't think you have been. That's a choice. And some people say, hey, we were born, I was born black. I can't peel it off. I can't change it. But I do want to try to give myself an equal chance. And I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime, but my sons and my grandchildren and the children after that, I want to try to do as much as I can to do so. And I'm going to end with this one. I give a homeless block party every year, well, twice a year. And I give out, we bring music and entertainment and I run across the individual 4 out of the 8 times. And he had a bad decision with his marriage where she took everything and he's paying her all this. And he is a doctor and he's homeless. And it's a white individual. He is a homeless doctor that has a practice and he sleeps on the street, goes to his office, takes a shower and goes about his daily every day as doctor. So my point in this, that it doesn't really matter about your situation. You said it before, like what you need to, Ron, you said it before on what do you need to do to get yourself out of that situation. It's different for everyone. This is a guy who spent his life in the medical field, all those student loans and bills and all that, and all that studying, and a mixed up marriage has put him out on the street. So whatever method that you have to do to keep on striving, that's what you need to do. You can't fall to racism. You can't fall to your environment or what's going on, regardless if you have all these elements against you that's stopping you, or you have all these elements for you, because a lot of times they go the other way. The privilege, they go the other way. They go, oh, I got everything handed to me, but I'm gonna be a badass anyway. I'm gonna go and smoke this and do this and drink that and act up in the street when their parents are very successful and they're very educated and that person is educated. But my point is, it doesn't matter who you are. There's good and bad in all of us, but we have to take those obstacles on each time they come to us and try not to get.
Right. I agree with you. And I will say that within that, I feel like I'm sitting here today because I embraced the things that coaches were willing to give me, whether they were white, black, Hispanic. I embraced all those things. And I think as young men, we have a problem with that sometimes. And it's the reasons, it's many reasons. But I think what I would want to say to a young man, 17, 18, 19, and 20 from this experience is, when people show up in your life and they want to help you, you need to embrace that as well. You can't continue to buck the system, because in the end, you're only hurting yourself, And I know that, we come from backgrounds that are tough, but there are white kids that come from backgrounds that are tough. There are Hispanic kids that come from backgrounds that are tough. Working in the Department of Corrections, I've seen many of these situations. And the sad part about it is, these are not dumb men. They're not dumb. They are smart, articulate, intellectual, good men who have gotten a bad break, and they continue to get bad breaks. But I also see some of them not willing to accept change or embrace change because they've let racism be their decision maker. I've seen young men that I've played with that when things didn't go their way, they blamed it on racism, or they say, well, it's because I'm black and the coach is white. And I'm like, well, wait, we got 20 other black guys on the team and they doing well. So sometimes we need to take a look in the mirror and find out, where our problems stem from. Now that may sound harsh, but to me, and gone through everything I've gone through, having 4 brothers killed, it's a difference maker. We need to take a look at ourselves sometime and ask the question, what is it that I need to change? Anybody want to comment on that, or anybody want to add to that about their experiences?
Ron, I want to jump on that real quick because I was on a Zoom today with faculty, administrators. Our president, it's funny, it's interesting you say that because our president made a comment today, and I thanked her for being 1,000% truthful, because she said that she's white privileged and doesn't understand what, the length of everything that's going on, right? And when you said people receiving that and wanting to get better and wanting our president, and I swear I thanked her and I said, that's so important for her to make that step and even say that, because some people won't say that, and she said that. So, how do now, to Jimmy and to the rest of our campus, we need to make sure that we put in front of her the education from whatever we need to do to help her with that. Because, the receiving of that, when I heard that, I was, it was wow, but it was thank you. Thank you for at least acknowledging that, because that's a step, I believe, and we need that.
I think for the first time in these situations, these protests, for the first time, it's called change talk. That's the therapeutic word for it. It's called change talk. We are hearing that. I'm sorry. We have been wrong, and I think it's basic to say the first step towards prevention is admitting, and it was courageous for her to come out and say, hey, I don't completely understand this. I was raised like this. And that's an honest answer. It doesn't get any more honest than that. So I'm in the LA area and I'm a photographer as well. So I've been to some of these protests. And for those of you that don't live in the area, I just want to let you know that these are awesome movements. One day I ended up right in the middle of one. I wanted to be there early, so I got there early because I understand the process. You have the protesters in the day, and then as the evening goes on, you have the young men that are coming out and they want to loot and do all those negative things. But I just want to say this, the core of these protests are people who have experienced police brutality, or they have experienced losing a loved one by way of police brutality. And it's a very emotional scene in there. There's a lot of tears in the middle of those crowds. There's a lot of tears in the middle of those crowds. These are people that have been hurt by these situations. Excuse me for being emotional. And then you have the second layer of people who are your voiceless, but they have strong convictions, and they're holding these signs up, letting their voice be heard in that way. And then on the outside of that, you have a younger generation, young kids who are being shaped in terms of what they're going to do in their life about these problems that we're facing in society. And I just wanted everybody to know that the thing that the TV is showing, the thing that the media is showing, the looting, the robbing, and all these negative things, those things are far smaller than they look on TV. I mean, they're running them over and over again, but there are some really passionate people out here, both for the first time in my life, white, Hispanic, Asian, Black, and in some cases more Hispanic than Black. I mean, you know, we are Los Angeles County, and we make up a huge number of Hispanic and Black population. And I thought that was awesome because, you know, there's conversation that, you know, there's tension between Blacks and Hispanics in LA County. But if there was, it's not now. It's not now. So I just wanted to add that sort of that little inside stuff to the conversation in terms of what these protests are all about. And I'll say this is the first time I participated in a protest, and I've been involved in them since the 60s. Not involved, but been living in LA County. And it's an experience. It's an experience to get out here and watch these people who are extremely passionate about not creating waves, but making changes. You know, those people in the middle, they're advocates. They're advocates for all races. You know, they're advocates for the Hispanic population. They're advocates for the African American population. And it is a sight to see. And I'm convinced that there's going to be changes made, but I think those changes are only going to occur within our law enforcement agencies. I mean, we've already had affirmative action. These situations have been discussed, especially in professional sports. Professional sports, you know, well, let's talk about the Black quarterback. The Black quarterback has always been looked down upon, you know, in the NFL. I think these situations will always exist, but I do think that we will be better off coming out of this situation than we were before. How much more better? I don't know, but I think we'll be better off.
You know, kind of following up with that with our younger alumni in here. You know, we talk about the protest, and you see it's a younger, older crowd. The younger ones are the ones trying to now become a louder voice. And you guys are all 2017 alums, so you're in that 22 to 24-year-old range. What do you guys feel that your athletic experience can bring to this, to bring the change? Like what Justin said, we have to bring the change. We can't just keep talking. At the end of the day, what are we going to do? Just hey, let's go eat at different places as teams. The little things that we can do as athletes, as coaches, administrators. What do you guys see as that next generation that could be this big voice?
I would say, especially being athletes and, you know, being held to a higher standard, people looking up to us, just using our brand for something better. So with the Chargers, our coach Lynn, he actually brings in like chief of police and different people like higher up just to speak with them and like with players and have open panels. I'm sorry, I'm at Walmart, but have open panels. Yeah. So they do open panels and try to like see what the players want and like what we think needs to happen and what needs to change. So I feel like we have a very strong influence on the community because, like, there's a lot of, you know, you don't know who's racist and who's not. A lot of people watch the games and stuff, and they don't care. They just want to watch their team win. And so to be able to actually go out there and like go out on a limb and to promote, you know, what's right, you know, for the world, that's a big thing. You know, you might lose a little bit, but at the end of the day, you're helping millions.
That's great. Paris, did you want to follow up with that? I saw you wanted to.
Yeah, no, for sure. I agree with everything you guys are saying. From my personal experience, I would just say, like, the way, you know, my teammates have invited me into their environment, whether it's going to Roscoe's or experiencing like a family party or whatever, I really felt like I had a better understanding and appreciation for them and their culture and who they were. And that just spoke volumes to me. Whether I was just hanging out with them, doing what they love to do, eating what they love to eat, seeing kind of what they enjoy versus maybe what I would do on a day-to-day basis, really made me understand and appreciate them to a whole new level. and, you know, just getting to know their families and their culture and, you know, their experiences and maybe the ways, you know, they have been discriminated against or things that they've run into. Just them being super open and honest with me, and then obviously me being willing to listen, because I think, you know, that's one thing you can control, and it's you being a good listener and having the attitude of, hey, I really do want to know, and I really do want to understand, and I want to experience, you know, your culture and what you love and, you know, your family and everything. So I would say that's really important, just to kind of have, you know, being receptive on both ends, inviting them in, them inviting you in, going to different places, experiencing, you know, what they love and all kinds of stuff like that.
Right, I agree.
And also, let me add to that too, what you both were saying. And I'm gonna use young slang like my kids. That's not cool. When you see something like that, that's, you know, derogatory or some sort of racism from your friends, just say it's not cool, and treat them accordingly, because it starts with our everyday conversations, but we don't stop each other and say, hey, wait, what do you mean, man? And it's all right to step up and say, hey, I got black friends, and they you know, that's not what it's all about. Just like the misunderstanding about Colin Kaepernick and the flag. Like, no, listen to the message and just say, sometimes when y'all having conversations with your friends, just say, hey, that's not cool. That's all it takes. Just to let them know, hey, that's not how I think. That's not how you should think.
Right.
So from a position of professional sports, there's kind of two things that happen. Obviously, guys get told, you know, shut up and dribble and do all that. And baseball has that culture immediately from the second you get in. You're just told to do nothing. I fully understand why an athlete, let's say you come out of the hood and you beat the odds and you do all these things and you're finally in that position, knowing that if you speak out, you can be deplatformed. Not everybody is going to want to, you know, bear that cross and speak up, and they should absolutely not have to. But what we can do is really rally around and protect the ones that do and are willing to risk their career for it and use that. And also understand, you know, for me, that's something that I feel like, look, if I'm going to lose my career over standing up for equality, cool. Like, I don't care. And everybody's going to be different on that, and that's fine. But we have a responsibility because, one, the career is super short. And two, it's probably the widest reach that you're going to have in your life. So whatever job I get after this, whatever it is, like this time now is probably the most people I'll ever be in front of. And it's probably the best time for me to impact change. If you impacting change is completely changing the financial situation of your family and the people around you, that's beautiful and amazing. And that's totally worth celebrating too. But I do think that athletes, one, breaking the mold of being dumb jocks, because that's just not true. You know, there's very, very educated athletes, and using that platform because we drive culture in so many ways. We control what people watch, what people wear, what kind of music they listen to. Like, we're at the forefront. And so understanding it sucks, but this is the way capitalism works. If we value teachers the way we would value athletes, we would pay them the millions of dollars. But we don't. We value entertainment, so we pay the actors and we pay the athletes. So that means that we value those people in society. So we need to hear from them. You know?
I agree with you.
Like, so that's, I think athletes, and we're seeing it now with Kaepernick and the conversation around that, like that changing in the next few years, I think is going to be amazing, hopefully on an optimistic front. And I hope more people are willing to sacrifice, and it doesn't always have good outcomes. The only person to ever kneel in baseball was immediately sent to play in Mexico and released.
Right.
There was one person that tried to do the same thing, immediately kicked out of the game and blackballed from the industry. You know,
right. I felt like when this thing first took off with Kaepernick, I felt like, and this is just the way I thought, and I'm going to be very honest and vulnerable in my answer. I was like, why didn't he just get paid and then do this? Because he had a mission, and now everything that he felt so strong about, and you're right, everybody was saying it was a relationship to the flag, but he straight out said this is about injustice, you know, but nobody wanted to hear the injustice part. They just wanted to hear the flag thing, and then our current president, you know, got involved and kind of put pressure on the NFL, you know, to make decisions that now they're regretting. And I think the message in that is we all have a responsibility to make change. And we have to be courageous enough to make change. But I want to say this to all the young athletes out there. Making change is not easy. And if you are going to step out in this arena, you better be damn well, you know what you're doing and you know what you're talking about and you've researched the subject, because stepping out in this arena, oh, you think you got haters now?
They'll come for you.
Hey, they're coming fully loaded. So, you know, my message to you young athletes is, yes, be prideful in who you are, love who you are. But, you know, when you want to take a step like this, is a huge step. I mean, look at Kaepernick. He gave up a lot of money, which is not what's important. He gave up his career, you know, for this subject of injustice. And I think today we understand more about, you know, what his decision was about. And it's going to be interesting to see if he goes back and plays in the NFL. I don't think he will, which would be sad for me, because he's made his point. And like the commissioner said, in any way that we want him to come back, he can come back. And I hope he does go back in some capacity to continue this fight for injustice. And all of us here on this panel, I think we do have a responsibility to at least speak up when we see these things happening in prison. In prison, wow. We have a responsibility to control, but we don't actually make the decisions in terms of how these situations turn out. Believe it or not, the prisons are actually ran by the gangs and the leaders. And I'll tell you how that's done. And again, it's about economics. If there's a fight in a prison and it's racial or something like that, then the whole prison gets shut down. Now, this is an interesting part. When the whole prison gets shut down, that means there's no movement, which means drugs, cigarettes, canteen, or whatever is not flowing. So that means there's no money being made in prison. So that's why you don't hear more prison riots, because when there's riots, the prison shuts down, there's no movement of illegal activity. And it's the decision that they make. Okay, so how is their money being transferred in prison? Well, it's not being transferred in prison. I'm the dealer, you're the buyer, you send the money to my auntie, my mother, my father, my brother. That's how the money is being transacted, through people on the outs. And there's a lot of money being made. Now that's some inside stuff, but we're gonna keep it right here.
We're getting toward the end of our panel. I think we touched on a lot of great subjects. I think we are building a plan to have the student athlete and then be a voice for change, and work with what we live in athletics. We live a little differently than just the general population, in my opinion. Does anybody want to have any last things to say to kind of close it out? Maybe last words to really touch our student athletes or future student athletes?
Yeah, go ahead, Kiki.
Okay. I did just want to touch on, I think it was something Justin was saying. It's more along the lines of just understanding when and how to be an ally. And something that I think everybody touched base on was getting educated and understanding what you're talking about before anything can escalate and get the ball rolling. I think when you are in a situation and you're uncomfortable and you see something you don't like or you feel something weird, you have to know that you are going to have an ally as much as you need to be an ally within yourself. You have to be the one that goes out and gets the information that you need about systemic racism, about redlining, about our criminal justice system, and just understanding the facts for yourself so that you can be a resource for the next person. It shouldn't be up to me just because I'm a person of color, because I'm Black. It shouldn't be up to me to have to educate Paris. It shouldn't be up to me to have to educate Joey or anybody for that matter. It's not up to me. It's up to you, yourself, your person. And then once you can grasp that information, then you move on. Then you start taking the steps. Then you become an ally for another person. Then you help. Because if everybody's just working off of ignorance and it's, oh, but you heard this and I don't like this and the Confederate flag means history and this and this and this and that, there's so much collision and everybody has something to say. If everybody's speaking from a place of knowledge, then it's a discussion versus just an argument where people are just spitting information at each other that has no background to it.
Right. That's very good information. Very good information.
Paris, did you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I just want to say I agree with that 100%, and it was just kind of goes along the lines of what I was going to say. Specifically to the athletes, like myself at Ventura College, I would just say, listen and don't just listen to respond to your teammates and the people that are around you. I think in our culture today, there's a huge mentality for kind of just an eye for an eye and kind of just this, everyone's angry and upset, and, listen to what's being said from your teammates and those people that you love and respect and that you sweat with every day, that you practice with every day, and let them educate you and then educate yourself on your own. And you need to be productive and proactive to that. And it is important and it should take up time in your life because it's not something that should just be pushed to the side ever. But the biggest thing for me is I would really say, really listen to those people and really immerse yourself into their culture. And as hard as it is, try to put yourself in their shoes. And you'll never be able to understand. You'll never be able to, fully realize or just comprehend what's going on. But you can, to a certain extent, if you really listen, kind of have a sense. And I think that's really important. And that's just one of the biggest takeaways from me and, what I did when I was at Ventura College and what I did at Cal Lutheran. And, that really, really helped me, and it's really helped people around me. So that would be the biggest thing for me.
Good words. Good words. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Anybody else?
I'll comment last, but if anyone else wants to speak, I'll comment.
Yeah. First and foremost, please be safe, everybody. And the only crazy part of this time going on right now is this coronavirus. This uprising it was needed to happen. It got to a boiling point. We just hope everybody is safe, that no more injuries, no more killings that happen. They have happened before. Hopefully that, things are being changed, and that's good. Change is a good thing. So let's not all take home or leave this meeting or continue to live our day-to-day thinking that these changes is a bad thing. This is a good thing. We are seeing unprecedented numbers of young voters. We are seeing unprecedented numbers when it comes to percentages of people getting involved. Not only in the States, you guys look at London, oh my God, they're Paris, everywhere. They are just going bananas.
Yes.
Australia. And this is a good thing, and embrace it, and screenshot pictures, and so when you guys get old and gray like Joey, not me, but old and gray like Joey, you could look back on your kids and say, hey, we went through this. And Ron, you said you went through this and during the 50s and the 40s. No, I'm just playing with you. But yes, it's a good thing, and please be safe out there, and continue to learn each other. Right.
I agree. I think I guess we're going to end this now. So what I've taken from this is that we have an extremely group of compassionate people about making a change in terms of our race relations, not only in our school but in America. I think the simplest thing that came out of this, and this is huge, and Ceballos made the point. You know how honest kids are. I think what he said was just acknowledging when you hear something wrong, that's not cool. They'll know exactly what you're talking about. So that's a great way to enter into something that you don't feel is right. That's not cool. And go about your business. Let them figure it out. The other thing is one of my favorite, I have many favorite coaches. I would say Coach Moose, but he's like a father, a brother, a coach, adversary. We do it all. But one of the great basketball coaches, Sabalas, I'm a football guy, but this is probably one of the great quotes I've ever heard was from Jim Valvano's last speech. And he said, "Don't give up. Don't you ever give up." And that's on everything. That's on people. That's on life, and especially on you. Don't ever give up on you. Embrace everybody that comes into your life that's trying to do goodwill to you, and stay away from those that are trying to do bad will. If you have friends and they smoke marijuana, that's not good. If you have friends and they do drugs, that's not good. But it's up to you as an individual to make that decision. And I'm going to leave it right there.
Well, I want to thank all of you. Like I said, I'm not part of the Ventura College family originally. I've come in the last few years and see the difference, because I'm a product of the California community college system, but to see the difference, and for you guys to come on as alumni to talk to our current student athletes, to build dialogue, it's going to do great things. And then our voice will get louder and larger. And like we said, we want that change. We want that change. Telling your teammate, that's not cool to talk that way. Right? That's where it's going to start. It's going to start there. So, thank you for being on. Thank you for sharing some stories. This is just the first step for our athletic department. We're going to keep doing things to help educate our student athletes. Again, thank you for being a part of this and coming on.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate